recording.
Yes.
Actually, it's not asking about.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi, welcome to the webinar Open Source in Mobile Test Automation with Cindrea as our presenter today. My name is Maaret and I'll be the moderator today. Ru will present for about 45 minutes and after that we'll have a questions and answers and discussions session. For the questions, you can use the chat window on your control panel on the right-hand side, and when you write something there, I'll ask that from Ru. You can use that during the presentation to ask clarifying questions, and in the end, whatever questions you have in mind. In the questions and answers section, there's also the option of speaking using your own mic if you want to share some idea or experience that you have on the topic. And that you would do by using the raise your hand tool, which is also available on the control panel. So we'll have a recording of the webinar available and Ru's slides on the fast web pages after the session. And for now, I'll actually hand you over to today's presenter. So here you go, Ru.
Hi, everyone. So my name's Ru. I'll talk about open source and mobile test automation. I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I've been a tester since 2002. I actually started as a tester in Romania, where I'm originally from, and my first project was testing a mobile application running on at that time the newest Nokia communicator, which was, I thought, the coolest thing I had seen. So since then, I think I've done about 7 years of mobile application testing. Now I'm working as a consultant and a managing partner at Altom, which is a Romanian software testing company that now has offices in Finland as well. I'm a member of the Association for Software Testing, and I also teach their black box software testing online course. And I'm currently using test automation on a customer project that I'm working full-time on, which is developing a mobile phone application on Android and iOS. Let's see. Okay, I don't know if you can still hear me. Hopefully it's all fine. I don't know, Maaret, what happened.
You can still hear.
Okay.
It's fine.
Okay, so going on, I will tell you a little bit about my my context today. I've started working with open source mobile test automation tools as part of a concept that I'm working on with Maaret for a fast test lab. A test lab is basically an open space where testers can practice testing with exercises, and all the tools that we use are open source as well as the software that we test. Part of that I wanted to actually include some mobile testing and also mobile test automation, so I've started working with different tools and trying to understand what's available. So this is a result of that work and my findings. It's good to mention as part of this, so that you understand my views as well. I do test automation currently, but I also believe that testing means checking and exploring, and the two should always go hand in hand. And about test automation in general, I believe that we can never assume that they are, like in the quote from Ilari from the tweet, test automation results are never just pass or fail or green and red. If you have them passing, that might mean that everything's probably fine, but it might also mean that it's a miss. And if they fail, it could be a problem, but it might also be just a false alarm. So there's always a lot of the investigation that comes after running a test automation set is probably more important at the end of the day. What I'll try to do with this presentation is to just look at the most common concerns that I've heard from people regarding open source in general, and then try to analyze them from the mobile testing perspective. The presentation will focus on Android and iOS because they are the market leader at the moment, and I think most of the mobile test applications currently available on the market are on these two platforms, but I will try to mention, whenever available, other platforms as well. I will also try to show examples of how to use some of the tools, and for that I will actually use the iOS platform and use an iPhone simulator to show you, for example, how to develop behavior-driven tests for an example application. And in general, with this presentation, what I want to do is just give some options and insights for other testers that might be working on mobile applications, and give them, some ideas for what kind of tools that they could use inside their projects for test automation. So this is the list of the most common concerns that I've heard from people in general about open source tools. And I'll try to go through them one by one and discuss them in the context of this presentation. The first one is really typically about mobile test automation. I've heard from a lot of people that, at least from their knowledge, there's not that many options for mobile testing. There are very well-known tools like Selenium that are available for web-based test automation, but people tend to think that it's not the same for mobile applications. So just to give you an idea, I have a list of some applications that are all some tools that are all open source that I found for different platforms. I'll go through some of them. For example, Robotium is, I think, at the moment just as popular as Selenium. It's the most commonly used test automation framework for Android. It's Java-based. Then there's a few, for example, Monkey Talk, which used to be Phone Monkey at the time when they only supported iOS, is now really popular for test automation for both iOS and Android. It's developed and open sourced by Gorilla Logic, and it's a very easy to use tool that will let you record and play and then update your scripts in supporting different languages. I'll also mention there's Native Driver that currently supports iOS and Android, but they do mention they have some plans for the Windows Phone platform. Nothing currently available, but apparently they're working on it. I think it's the only one I've heard as open source for Windows Phone. And then there's T-Driver, which is the tool open source by Nokia, which supports Qt mobile applications, so that covers some part of the Symbian phones. There's also Calabash, which is actually the tool that I want to show as an example during this presentation, which works for iOS and Android, and it's a behavior-driven test automation framework. These are just some of the tools that I found. If we share the slides, it also includes the links for all of them, so you can have a look at them in more detail. But there's plenty of options available, and all of these are open source, so then free. Going on to the next concern, typically there's some level of concern when it comes to open source tools, thinking that the level of support will not be as good as with commercial tools. And in the mobile application testing context, I think at the moment there are many of these tools are actually open sourced by a company whose main business is to actually provide support for these tools. So if the short answer to Google it and find the answer online from the online communities is not enough, then there's always the option of just getting paying for a commercial package that will include not just professional support from the supporting companies, but also training if needed. Some of them even offer customized support for your actual application, and then providing help with the initial scripts or getting started in general with test automation. But it's good to keep in mind that with the support that you get with a commercial tool, it's free, but you still have to pay for the tool in the first place. So in that sense, going for a commercial package, support package, might be an option. However, in my experience with the open source tools, the people that work on these tools are really committed, and the ones using them seem to be very active in the online communities and groups that each of the tools have. And I think, at least from my experience, I've always gotten an answer, less than 24 hours. And the good part about the working with open source tools is that you don't need to wait for a new release from the company providing the tool, but you might actually get a fix from one of the other users of the tool or from one of the developers before there's an actual official release that includes more fixes and more improvements. So I think that's actually a bonus for the open source tools. Another common concern is that typically open source tools don't have very much documentation. It's hard to find how to install them and configure them, and there's all this hassle to get started. And for discussing this one, I want to start using Calabash, one of the open source tools that I mentioned, as an example. And I will actually show you some scripts that we developed together here for an example application, which will be WordPress mobile. So Calabash is a test automation framework for Android and iOS. It's open source by a company called Less Painful. They also offer the support that I mentioned in the previous slides. It focuses on Cucumber. Cucumber is another great open source development tool for behavior-driven development, which uses Gherkin. Gherkin is a domain-specific language that's used to define tests in a non-technical way, preferably using examples and in a business-readable format. So the language itself is basically almost plain English, and we'll see how tests are defined using this later on in the presentation. Calabash focuses on Cucumber, but then it also supports, it's Ruby-based, and it supports any other Ruby-based framework, and I think maybe even some other test frameworks. I've even heard that there's currently some work ongoing to support, for example, Robot Framework. They have really good documentation on Google, on their Google Groups and on GitHub, where they host all of their code. And just to show you what it means to actually install and configure Calabash, for example, for iOS, this is all explained on their GitHub page in the fast track installation instructions, which are really well documented. Basically, if you're on Mac, if you're on Mac OS, which you must be if you're developing for tests for iOS, all you need to do, you have Ruby installed already, so all you need to do is actually install a gem that will be downloaded automatically, and this is it. That's all you need to do to install the framework. And then to actually configure your code to support the Calabash framework and to allow you to write tests, all you need to do is actually to run this Calabash iOS setup command that will create all the needed targets and project configuration for your specific project, and that's it. Your configuration is done. So, and this is where I'll take it when we do this is where I'll take it from when we start developing our first test. Very related to the previous concern is the idea that it always takes so much time that you need to invest to understand open source tools, and the commercial tools always seem a lot easier to use, and they have the playback and record functionality, and again, tied to the concern about how difficult it is to configure, I want to go on and also introduce the example application that I've chosen. So WordPress Mobile is simply just a mobile client for the WordPress platform, which is currently the most popular blogger platform. It's a simple client that allows you to add your to log in with your blog, whether it's self-hosted or actually on WordPress.com, see your posts, and then edit them or add them or moderate comments. So this would be it's also open source, so this is why I chose this application to show you how to write some automated tests. If we think about trying to write a test for this WordPress application, I chose, for example, one of the features that the application has is that you should be able to edit a post that you have on your blog. So, you know, as a WordPress user, you do want to be able to manage your posts from your phone through this client. And one particular scenario for this feature would be to be able to edit a post as with an author account. What we see here is actually the feature and scenario format is the Gherkin language format. It's, as you can see, it's basically plain English, and we can understand all of anyone could write these tests, and specifically business people could work with the team to develop these tests to specify their features. And a good idea is to always use examples, like actual examples, while trying to define a scenario. So like in this case, what I would like to do is to test a scenario where I log into the Software Test Lab blog. I use a mobile app, which is an account which has author credentials, and when I do that, I should be able to see this one post with the title, "What is the Test Lab?" Once I see that, I should be able to select it and edit it. So this is how I would define, maybe there's better ways, but this is what how I thought I would define a feature and an example scenario for editing a post. And what I would like to do is just try to show you what we need to do to actually have this running on the iPhone simulator using Calabash. So I'll try to see if I can exit the presentation. Basically, in the previous slide, I showed what it means to actually just install Calabash, the framework, and then have it set up for your specific project. In this case, this is my WordPress project, the code itself, as seen in Xcode. For those of you who are not familiar with the iOS development, Xcode is the Mac development environment tool. So when we set up the Calabash framework for this project, what it basically does is it will create a new target for the project and a new scheme that includes all the needed settings to build the application to include the Calabash framework. It also adds the framework to the project, as you can see here. And at the moment, all we need to do is basically run the application. We can run it from Xcode in the simulator, and this will have you can see the application here now. This will have all the needed hooks and settings to support developing tests with Calabash and Cucumber. To actually start writing the tests, what we would have to do is from a terminal window, I am now in the directory where I have the code for the WordPress application. And what I would have to do is first of all create the directory structure that Cucumber typically uses. Calabash can do that for you with this one command that will generate a sample script that will help you move on with the test script development. I will try to do this now. So basically we now have so Calabash creates a very basic test that just checks for a main view on the application and then swipes to the right and exits. So we can actually run this right away, or we should be able to run it by just typing Cucumber as the instructions say, and we should try it. This will start the simulator, start the application in the simulator, and will run the basic test that I talked about. So this is basically all it does. We can see here now in the terminal the tests that have been run. Given that I'm on the welcome screen, then I swipe left. It's just a basic test that will try to swipe on the screen and take a screenshot. I will now show you how I will add the directory structure created by Calabash to the project. So let's see, it creates a feature directory that we can add here, and then we can see inside there's a .feature file that contains, similar to the example that we want to implement, just a sample feature to be, as an iOS developer, you would like to run a test. That's the feature that you want to try, and in this case there's an example scenario that does the steps that we've just seen. To implement these steps, we have another folder here called steps definition, which has an implementation for one of the steps that's not already predefined. This is just a directory structure that you don't need to create yourself. It's created, automatically generated by Calabash. But now what we actually want to do is try to create the test that we've seen here. So I will try to just copy paste this into the feature file. I will replay. Oh, sorry, I clicked the wrong thing, so I will reopen. Okay, so I will replace the feature file with the features that we want to implement. These are the two that we have agreed on, and at this point we can actually try to run the test script as it is. I will try to put I will start the application manually so that we don't wait for the simulator to load every time, and then on here there's a parameter that you can put to not launch the simulator but have it already launched. So let's see, we have the application here, and if we try to run the script that we've just edited, it will actually tell us that it sees that we have a feature in one scenario that we want to run, but the scenario has 3 steps that haven't yet been defined. The nice thing about Cucumber is that it actually gives you the code snippet here that you need to implement. So these would be the steps that we would have to put in our my first steps Ruby file. So I will replace them here as copied from the terminal. And for example, this is actually a nice feature. Our scenario said that we want to log in with mobile app in quotes to this one URL. When the code snippet is generated, the 2 values that we put into quotes are already seen as arguments that we pass to the script. So when we implement this step here, we already have the Cucumber already detects that we have 2 arguments that we want to use. What Calabash has is, as a plus to Cucumber, is a set of already predefined steps that we can use, and I will show them in use here. So if we look at the application, what we would have to do to implement this first step, which is to log in, we would have to first click on this Add Self-Hosted Blog, and then enter the URL, username and password, click Save, and then we should see our posts. So Calabash doesn't offer record and playback functionality, but what it does for iOS, for example, it has a very powerful Ruby console. I will show you how this is used. If we do console, it will start a Ruby console that is now connected to the application running on the simulator. And the great thing about the console is that it allows you to check and explore all the buttons and all the elements that are available on the application, and you can easily see their accessibility label ID, which is the most common way to identify objects in iOS, by a simple command like this. So just by using trying to find the labels for buttons, we see all of the existing buttons on the current screen. We have the info button right here, and then the other three buttons available on the screen. In the console, we see the ID by which we can use them in the test script, and then we also see their indexes, and we can also see more information if needed. Also, we can see all other types of objects. For example, if we just want to see all the labels that are available here, then we can see, yeah, a list of everything that is, even the text, if you already have a blog test or if you want to start a new one. So this is a very easy way to access and check what objects we have available to use in our test automation scripts. In this case, we basically want to click this one Add Self-Hosted button first. What we would type in the implementation of this step would be, again, plain English. We would write, when I press the Add Self-Hosted Blog. Then we would like to see we can go to the next screen and see what's available there. Again, we can check. We would basically want to see username, password, and all this information. So we can check for that. And again, we see them here. So we can copy. For example, we want to check that the username and password fields are available. So we put, again, plain English. Then I should see. It also auto-completes, so that's very nice. I should see WordPress username, and I should see I'll just copy paste this and put password. And just so that we don't wait for me to type all of this, I will open a separate file where I have the script already. So let's see. If I look for features, I'll just take my first steps. We see the same steps. I will just copy the rest of it so that we don't waste time on that now here. Okay, so this is something that we can actually already run. Again, we can go to the other terminal window, having the application where we started, and we can try to run this first step. It will go and actually put in all the details that we need. So this was basically our first step, given that I log in with the mobile app to the software test lab. In the terminal window, we can see now that one step has passed, and then the other are still not implemented. The first one is pending, so the next one is skipped. Again, I will copy now the whole script so that we don't wait for me to type, and then I'll go through it in more detail. So these are all the steps implemented for this one scenario that we have to work. Given I log in with a username, then I select what is the test lab, and I should be able to edit it. The same steps, we see them here, implemented. As you can see, when I select, again, the argument for the step called when I select the what is the test lab, post, the argument is automatically detected, and we just pass it. We wait to see this post, and then we select it and we take a screenshot. I think all of these tests are very easy to follow. It's very easy to understand. To edit, we should wait to see an update button after we select the post. Then we should see the title and the context of the post. Then if we click with the native keyboard, we can enter an updated text to the title field, and then when we save it, we should see the updated title. I will show this running now, but I will also have to I've added another step to change everything back so that we leave everything the way we left it. So I will add that here, and I change everything back. Okay, so this is something that we can now basically, it's implemented and we can run it and use it for testing. I want to actually show it not run from the terminal now, but running from Jenkins. I have a local installation of Jenkins available. For those of you who, I'm not sure who is in the audience and how many of you have used continuous integration tools, Jenkins is a continuous, I think the most common continuous integration tool at the moment, which allows you to, for example, have different kinds of jobs run either at specific times or based on specific events that can get the code from a repository, build an application, run unit tests, and then run any functional automated tests that you might have. These are a few of the projects that I have set up here on my machine locally. For example, I have one job that will build the WordPress code and produce the application that can be installed on the iPhone. And then in this case, I have also the Calabash test. This will actually now, if we look at how it's configured, it will just start the application on the simulator and clean the simulator to make sure everything's in a new state. And then it will, this is the same, I copy the scripts in the local directory, and this is the command that actually starts the tests as we've seen in the terminal, except I put a bigger timeout here if needed. And then there's some formatting for the reports. So this can be run, based on code changes or whenever we want to do it. We can run it every night. I will try to give it a go now so you can see the full script running. So yeah, the same as we've seen before, except now it goes through the entire script. In Jenkins, we can also save all sorts of artifacts after we run a test, and for example, now I will show a couple of reports formats that you can get in Jenkins and from Cucumber in general. And you can also save all the screenshots, all the result files in a nice format where you can access them from a web page later on. So we've updated the post and then changed it back to everything. The job should now be finished. We can see the report here and all the screenshots that the test had saved. If we look at it, this is the typical Cucumber HTML report. Everything has passed. We have one scenario that implements four, actually, I don't know why it says, oh yeah, it's 4 steps. For each of the steps, we can see, for example, the screenshot of what we were doing. The post has been updated, so we can see that there now. This is a very simple test, but I can show you I can show you a different project that has multiple features with the same type of report. So if we look at this one, it's a more complicated one. You can also collapse also. We can just see the main sections. We have 3 features that we want to implement, and then for each of those we have some scenarios here. Only one scenario is actually implemented for all of these, so we get a yellow status saying nothing's failing, but we don't have all of your tests defined. There are also, for those who use Jenkins, I think a lot of the time the preferred report format would be JUnit, or this is one example. I think we can have the reports in many different formats, but this is, for example, a JUnit report. It's actually for a failing test run with more features. The same kind of information. These are the features that we test, and then for each of them we have these are the scenarios. One of them was skipped, two of them were failed. So, and then Cucumber also has some nicer, flashier reports that we can have a look at. So, for example, this one shows some nice bubbles and percentages with the same kind of idea behind it. So now going back to the presentation, let's see if I can just go back to the play mode. I was trying to show you this in the context of discussing the fact that people tend to think that commercial tools are easier, and I think I chose Calabash because I think this is one good example where the tool is actually easy to use, and in comparison to well, at least the commercial tools that I've used, I think a lot of the times the commercial tools only looks easier. And that might be partly because the salespeople really focus on the ease of use of the tool, and they emphasize that it can be used by non-technical testers, and it has the record and play functionality emphasized, and the sales is based on the fact that it's very easy to use by anyone in the team. But in practice, I think everyone who has done test automation knows that test automation is at the end of the day programming, and it's not typically done by non-technical testers. And even if record and playback tools are useful, the tests that they produce are hardly ever usable. At least I don't know how to record in a manner that would give me something usable right away. And I'm not the most technical person, but still I find it very, very useful, even if I do have to spend time to understand the technical details of a tool, because that basically means I understand the technical details of the technology that the application that I'm testing uses, and that's always a very useful thing, regardless of the reason why you learn more technical details about what you're testing. Also, I think even with commercial tools, we know that even those require a lot of time spent to understand the tools and what are the best uses. And yes, you can write a script quite easily sometimes, but that also means that if you want to get into more complex scenarios, then you do need to spend time to understand the technical part of it as well. Also, I do think a tool like Calabash is extremely easy to use, and it's very easy to configure, and the guys working on it have tried to make all the parts that are typically the annoying parts very easy, like configuring your targets and adding all the frameworks to your Xcode project and trying to build with the right settings and all that stuff. That's always difficult, even with some of the commercial tools I've tried. And if for example, record and playback is important, there's also Monkey Talk has that functionality, offers that, so that's also an option if it's something that's very important for you. Moving on to the last of my list of concerns about open source test automation tools. I think this is a very big concern about open source tools in general, and that is that there's a very big risk that the contributors or the developers of the tool might lose interest, and the project might die or might disappear. And to discuss this, I think that is a real risk, and open source projects, it's true that they are often abandoned, but this is a real risk also with commercial tools. That might happen regardless of whether it's open source or commercial. And at least with open source tools, if that happens, there are a few points that are in your favor because you're using open source. For example, you haven't spent any, you've only spent time. You probably haven't spent any other money on the tool compared to a commercial tool that you might lose access to. And at the end of the day, you still have the source code. You might be able to improve it yourself, or your could have help from your development team to improve the code, and you might still get new features or new fixes from other users like yourself who have been using the tool, because the code is there available and anyone can develop it further. And also, you do have the flexibility to switch to another open source tool without having to explain to someone who's invested money in a commercial tool why you need another one, or why you need to why you spent money on something that wasn't at the end of the day useful. Also, in favor of the open source tools, I think if we think of tools like Jenkins, the one I showed, or Selenium, or even Cucumber and Robot Framework, or JUnit, or there's many examples out there. All of these, I shouldn't necessarily mention testing tools. They're just tools that help the test automation in general. They give us hope. They're very popular. They've been out there for a very long time. There's the risk of these tools being abandoned is really low, and they've been developing so far because people have invested the trust in them and have developed the code further and added features. And I think this is a very important thing to leave you with. This is my last slide. I think it's very hard to imagine today's software world without open source tools. We wouldn't have Linux, we wouldn't have Apache or Git or Eclipse or Firefox or even Android itself, the whole platform, which is open source. So I think it's very good to keep in mind that some of the most basic things that we use in today's software development world are open source. So I think this was my main presentation. Marit, are there any questions?
So we're ready for the questions, so you can put whatever you have, questions, comments, things like that, into the chat window on your right. I also would like to remind you that if you want to speak out and you want to use your microphone to ask your question or share your experience, you can use the raise hand feature. And it seems we have at least somebody who wishes to use that. So let's see how that works. So I'm going to try giving the voice for our Kamrul Afzan is wishing to ask question.
Yes. Hello.
Hi.
Hi, can
Hello.
you hear?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, this is Kamrul from Tampere. Thank you for a very nice presentation. Actually, it was very interesting to see everything in, in context. And,
Thank you.
Yep. The question is, do you have any idea about the Windows Phone or test automation, some open source framework or something like that, which you should similar kind of, I hope.
As far as I know, there's nothing open source out there, but I'm not the most familiar person with the Windows Phone platform, so I haven't heard from anyone that there would be any tool available already. Like I said, I can't remember which one it was now, one of the tools that I have in the first slides, they did mention that they have plans for developing something for Windows Phone, but they have nothing at the moment. So I know this is a big question in Finland, so yes.
Okay, yeah, because I also tried to, a little bit explore this area last few months. I found something, but actually it was not, as easy, or actually it was not actually working totally. This is specs for trying to .NET environment.
Yeah.
So, yeah, very unfortunate.
I think it might take some time.
Yeah, thank you anyway.
We have a couple other questions here. Anssi Lehtelä is asking about running these tests that you showed on a real device, like not in a simulator but on a real device. Is there any difference?
Of course, there are differences in the sense that you need to, for iPhone, Apple doesn't allow anyone other than Apple tools to automatically start the application on a phone. So you need to have a script that does that beforehand. Other than that, there's nothing in the test scripts that you need to change. They are exactly the same. And for Android, there's no difference between the simulator or the actual phone.
Okay. And then we have another one let's see, for which kinds of mobile apps automation tests should be used? Like, do you have a advice on what kind of apps it's appropriate for?
I think it depends a lot on what you're trying to achieve with test automation. I think it can, well, it depends on how much the platform allows you, but talking about Android and iOS, I think some level of test automation can be done for any kind of mobile application. When we talk about the repetitive tasks that we can use tools to automate, I think that's always a good idea. I think it depends so much on the context of your own team. Like if you have support from developers, of course it's easier, but you can always manage some level of test automation even if you don't have that. I think for continuous integration, it's very helpful to have also the functional smoke tests automated that just verify that the build isn't broken and everything's still in place. And of course, if you have the time, the support, the need for that, building your regression test suites automatically might be a good idea. But I think it's, I don't know if I can think of, well, yeah, one big difference with mobile automation for Android, for example, is the fact that you have all the different devices, the device types and different versions of the platforms and different providers with different platforms. So that's again something that is useful to have automated. If you can run an automated basic check on different Android devices, that is also a very, very helpful thing to have when you're developing for Android.
We don't have any other questions on the line right now, so I'll share the poll that we had in the beginning.
Yes.
Just for you to see like what kind of an audience we have. So we were asking in the beginning, those who were here before start of the session, about the background that you have with regard to mobile test automation and kind of the context of questions that you might have. So you're still free to ask it more questions if you feel like it. But it seems that we have some people here who are doing actually these types of things already. Some people who are seeing others doing these kind of things, and then a couple of people who, or similar percentages in something you might need to do in future. So not everyone got to vote this time. We closed the poll quite early in the presentation, but just to give you an idea of the profile of who are around this time. Do you have any more questions? Seems like we are done for today then. So thanks everyone for joining, and let's hope we see you again in a future session. So thanks and goodbye.
Thank you.